It had been the same nightmare for weeks now, but always fading into echoes as he awoke. Not tonight, though. Tonight he was able to see more, to hold on to the details of his dark, twisted dream and the warning it contained. Dr. Stephen Strange had once been an accomplished surgeon, yet fate had destined him to become the Sorcerer Supreme of Earth after a car accident claimed the use of his hands. Now Strange was a protector of his world, and countless others in the vast expanse of the multiverse, a master of the mystic arts wielding his skills in sorcery and arcane artifacts to defend against malevolent otherworldly threats. But even he had never seen anything like this nightmare before. On the night where the details of the dream felt easier to keep a hold on, a sleeping Stephen was shown all manner of horrors. The world he had devoted himself to protecting was crumbling, burning. All around was death and suffering, the air shrill with the screams of tortured, innocent souls. To make matters worse, within the dream, Strange could feel the same suffering reaching out, crossing the boundaries between realities. It wasn't just his world he saw dying, it was all of them. Every corner of the multiverse falling. It turned his stomach. It all felt so real, not just an anxious, unconscious fantasy of something he feared might happen. This was a warning of something that would come to pass. The dread felt by the Sorcerer Supreme only got worse as he witnessed a familiar figure, injured and broken, crawling free of the rubble of a destroyed city, the flickering light of endless fires doing little to mask the man's wounds. Instantly, Dr. Strange recognized the wounded figure from the distinctive flared cloak he wore to his goatee and dark hair graying at the temples. It was him, or rather, another version of him from a different reality within the multiverse. "Help," the other Strange said weakly. Instantly, Stephen knelt to help his interdimensional doppelganger up. "What happened here?" he asked, concerned at the vision of destruction all around. "I couldn't stop it," the messenger Strange replied in labored breaths. He was wounded fatally, barely holding on. "Slow down. Breathe." Dr. Strange calmly instructed his other self, still retaining a bedside manner from his days as a surgeon. "This vision, I take it you're trying to warn me of something." "Yes," the dying sorcerer replied. "I cast a spell that should reach you in your sleep, although sending a message across the multiverse is..." He paused to wince in pain, feeling his already fading strength dwindling further. "It takes a lot more than I have left." "It's all right," Strange assured him. "I can hear you. I'm listening. I only wish I could do more for you." "It's all right." His variant forced a weak smile. "By the time this message reaches you, I'll already have been dead. But you need to be warned." "What happened here?" Strange urged. "It's not what has happened. It's what's coming. It had to be us. Of course it did." The other's breaths started slowing. "I tried everything. I really did, but I've never felt power like it." "Just tell me who!" Stephen shouted, aware his other self was fading fast, desperate to hear the full warning before the dream ended. Already, Dr. Strange's mind was racing with potential candidates who could have been responsible. He knew of a plethora of deities and destructive creatures capable of launching attacks on his home universe, and many of whom had time and time again. There were the likes of Nightmare and Shumagorath, and of course his arch-nemesis Dormammu, an entity who had long desired total control over this plane of existence Stephen's Earth inhabited. But not one of them had the power to subjugate the entire multiverse in one fell swoop. "Please," Messenger Strange rasped, leaning up to Stephen's ear. "Don't make the same mistake I did. Beware the Scarlet King." He collapsed. His breathing stopped as Dr. Strange looked at the horrific sight of a man almost identical to him dying, having failed to prevent the chaos that was now consuming everything. The Sorcerer Supreme had an encyclopedic knowledge of the mystic arts and all kinds of occult beings, but he had never heard of the Scarlet King. As he woke in a cold sweat, still feeling the same dread he felt in the dream, Dr. Strange could remember the warning from his other multiversal self. It had to be him. He had to stop the Scarlet King. "The Scarlet who?" repeated Wong, Stephen's trusted friend and confidant, an expert in both mystic and martial arts, as well as an accomplished scholar. "Scarlet King. The other me was adamant that this thing had to be stopped by another version of me," Dr. Strange explained. Having woken up flustered with growing concern over his vision, Stephen had spent the whole morning in the library. The Sanctum Sanctorium had long been Strange's home and base of operations since he had inherited the title of Sorcerer Supreme from the Ancient One. Additionally, the magical building in the heart of New York's Greenwich Village also possessed a sprawling library filled with tomes that contained what was thought to be the sum total of all occult knowledge. His books were filled with useful information on spells, other planes of existence, even detailing accounts of threats Stephen had already faced, like Dormammu, and yet there was no mention of any Scarlet King. I don't understand it. My other self, he mentioned it specifically by name, but I can't find a single reference to it in any texts. Strange sighed in frustration. The Book of Cagliostro, nothing. No mention of a Scarlet King. Strange, Wong mused. What? No, I mean, it's unusual you found nothing. His friend answered, trying to hide a smile at catching Stephen in a joke. Perhaps the Book of Vishanti holds more answers. It contains all of the knowledge the great sorcerer Agamotto collected on the mystic— Nope, already tried that, Dr. Strange interrupted. I consulted our copy on the Darkhold too while I was at it. You did what? Wong exclaimed, ever concerned by Stephen's arrogant and reckless behavior. The Darkhold was a dangerous tome, a book of spells used only for pure evil, written by an elder god named Kython. Even though the original true Darkhold was out of reach, the knowledge contained within the copy Stephen possessed was still perilous to be exposed to. Oh, relax, Strange replied in a rather blasé manner, still absent-mindedly flicking through the pages of another book, the Codex Imperium. Damn it, I need to know what it is I'm up against, he yelled in frustration. Wong, you didn't see what I saw in that dream. It was chaos, destruction unlike anything I've ever felt before. I understand, Stephen, his fellow sorcerer answered. And as Sorcerer Supreme, you hold a duty to protect this reality from those that would seek to threaten its safety. But this is dangerous. A being we know nothing about is rare. Perhaps consider if there's a reason why we know nothing of this Scarlet King. There is some knowledge that is not meant to be uncovered. Knowledge is power, old friend, Dr. Strange retorted. And if I'm going to do my duty to protect our reality, I need to know anything that will give me an edge. I'll be in my study. With that, the Sorcerer Supreme strode off to a private corner of the sanctum. He spent the next few restless hours using his mastery of the occult to peer into the future. Understanding the mystical mechanics of time in the way he did meant Stephen was aware that there was no singular future, but rather millions upon millions of possible outcomes, a web of potential courses that fate could take, and any decision made could create a new strand in this already tangled mess. Still, there was no outcome where any Scarlet King existed. However, it was then that Dr. Strange realized what he had been missing, a detail so small that it had gone unnoticed, but so crucial that it changed his entire approach. He had been thinking of the situation entirely wrong, in an insular fashion that focused solely on his own reality, his universe. But the warning had come from across the multiverse, from another Strange in another world. What's more was the feeling, the sense he'd felt during the nightmare. Although he knew nothing of his enemy, Strange could tell the destruction the Scarlet King was capable of had the reach to threaten all corners of the multiverse. This wasn't just a threat to his world, but all worlds. Strange's search for answers about the Scarlet King had proved fruitless thus far. Yet remembering this was a threat coming from across the vastness of the infinite multiverse oddly seemed to provide some sense of comfort. Because there was one entity he did know of who might be able to help. Hands aglow with magic, Dr. Strange performed the correct ritual he knew would allow him to communicate with the living tribunal. Sure enough, the room around him faded away, and he was presented with the highest authority in the multiverse. The towering, vastly powerful entity was humanoid in shape, save for a head floating separate from its shoulders, with 3 faces, one fully hooded, one half, and the other uncovered. The Sorcerer Supreme had conversed on a few occasions with the entity, enough to know it was responsible for safeguarding the multiverse, to prevent universes from amassing too much power in case they threatened others, maintain balance, which made the fact it had done nothing to prevent the imminent danger of the Scarlet King all the more concerning.
Speak, Strange.
Living Tribunal, I've come seeking answers, Dr. Strange replied. There is a being, an entity that poses a threat to my world and all others in the multiverse.
I am not aware of such a threat,
the multiversal arbiter replied. Please, Strange urged. It's out there, and I need to be the one to stop it. There's no information on it in my universe, so I ask you, please tell me where I can find someone, anyone who knows about the Scarlet King. There was a silence for a moment as the different faces of the living tribunal conferred. All three had to agree on whether or not it could interfere.
The answers you seek lie beyond your universe.
The tribunal finally answered.
We are in agreement. I will send you there, but exercise caution, Stephen Strange.
In a flash, Dr. Strange had appeared somewhere new. The room was dark, filthy, nothing short of bleak, but still was a far cry from the destruction he had seen in his vision. The walls were covered in scribbled writing that had seemingly been scrawled over every surface by someone in a state of madness. There was one that caught Dr. Strange's attention, a figure adorned in red armor, large antler-like horns protruding from his head. It didn't take someone with as much knowledge of Sorcerer Supreme to know this was a drawing of the elusive Scarlet King himself. "Who's there?" a voice rasped. Stephen turned to see an old man, withered and alone, laying on a grimy hospital bed in a corner of the room. "Sorry, I didn't see you," he said calmly, cautiously approaching, only lowering his guard when he heard the elderly man give a hoarse cough. "You're very sick," Strange remarked. "Dying, I think," the man replied. "Are you Foundation?" "Foundation?" the sorcerer echoed in confusion. Yes, don't be surprised. I know all about them," the anonymous man said weakly. "I haven't forgotten when I used to work there, or how they felt about what I know. Though they'd stop at nothing to silence me. God knows they've tried over the years." "Listen, I was sent here because I need answers," Dr. Strange interrupted, aware of the impending threat he felt he needed to avert. "So, Mr.
Doctor!
the old man corrected.
Dr. Robert Montauk.
"Dr. Montauk," Stephen echoed. "What can you tell me about the Scarlet King?" Montauk started chuckling, a dry, wheezing sound, almost like he was taunting the sorcerer. His laughter lasted far longer than that of a sane man, paired with the drawings and markings on the walls. Stephen was certain something inside Robert Montauk was broken.
"Oh, I could tell you so much about the Scarlet King. I was one of his children once, so long ago now,"
he sighed, a loud hacking cough brought on by his laughter forcing its way out of Montauk's throat.
But that's his strength, you see. Being known, being understood.
"Look, this being is threatening my world. I need to know how I'm supposed to stop him," Strange asked.
Stop him?
Dr. Montauk chuckled at him.
What makes you think you can?
"I was told I have to," the Sorcerer Supreme admitted. "It has to be me. And if you won't tell me what I need to know, then I'm very sorry. Normally I'd never do this, but in the grand calculus of the multiverse, there's nothing I won't sacrifice to protect it." With a wave of his hands, Dr. Strange conjured his third eye, which snapped open in the center of his forehead. It functioned as an organic manifestation of his amulet, the powerful mystical artifact known as the Eye of Agamotto. And through it, Stephen peered into Dr. Montauk's fractured mind, seeking out the information he was withholding about the Scarlet King.
No, you can't!
Montauk shouted, his frail, withered hands gripping his temples as he felt the sorcerer invading his memories. "I'm sorry," Strange repeated, "but knowledge is power, and I need to know how to stop the Scarlet King."
You think knowledge is power?
The old man rasped.
It's more than that to him. It's a weapon. His weapon. The more we know about him.
It was too late. Dr. Strange had found what he was looking for. Years earlier, Dr. Robert Montauk had been working at the SCP Foundation and had uncovered the true nature of SCP-001, Tufto's proposal, otherwise known as the Scarlet King. The King was an elder god, a force of pure chaos and the manifestation of a hatred for modernity. But it was far worse than that. A huge crimson crack split through the concrete wall, a doorway to the Scarlet King's domain. Pulling himself out of Robert Montauk's mind the second he realized his mistake, Dr. Strange was still reeling as the portal opened. How could he have been so stupid? His nightmare hadn't been a warning to prevent what was coming. It was either a warning to stay away or a trap. Snapping back to awareness, Stephen found he was no longer in the filthy room where the dying Dr. Robert Montauk lay. Instead, he was in a vast multiversal void, a space between universes. And there, among the huge expanse of nothingness, stood the Scarlet King. He towered over Dr. Strange, his physical form adorned in armor the shade of blood. Atop his head was a crown-like ornament, the large antlers jutting out above. His hands were gnarled claws clenched into massive fists, and his many eyes were looking at Stephen. Having seen inside Montauk's mind, Dr. Strange had realized all too late that the Scarlet King was more than just an ancient evil being. and a desire to return to a more violent age. But if nobody talked about him, he would gain no further power. The Scarlet King had only grown in strength the more the SCP Foundation had tried to learn about him. And now the Sorcerer Supreme himself had done the same. The King had achieved even greater power thanks to Strange falling into his trap, enough to open a gateway and bring him here.
You already know, don't you, Sorcerer?
The Scarlet King snarled, his voice sounding like billions upon billions of insects chittering.
Through Montauk, you know.
Stephen looked in horror at the interdimensional abomination. Even just by observing him, being able to perceive his physical form, he was unintentionally empowering the entity. But living idea or not, Strange had seen the destruction that the Scarlet King could unfurl on the multiverse. By the hoary hosts of Hoggoth, Dr. Strange declared, summoning up a spell that he hoped would reverse whatever power the king possessed. You will not harm my world, nor any others! Unleashing his magic in a blast of light, the beam struck the Scarlet King. The Elder God was harmed, but not undone, the force of the mystic arts being almost as ancient as the Scarlet King was, and thus he could still be hurt. The Scarlet King raised a mighty fist, bringing it slamming down towards Stephen. He was barely able to cast the Shield of Seraphim, creating a protective circle of mystical energy that formed a barrier between Strange and the oncoming attack. As the descending gigantic fist of the Scarlet King was deflected, he instantly brought his other down in a vicious attack. The sheer force of it broke Stephen's concentration, causing the shield to dissipate, barely withstanding enough of the king's physical strength to prevent the sorcerer from being knocked down. It was like one magically powered ant fighting against a being impossibly bigger that could stomp Strange out of existence in seconds. But even failing to the imperceptible ground of the void, Dr. Strange didn't let up, refusing to relent and let the Scarlet King unleash his wrath on the multiverse. His cloak of levitation lifted him back to his feet, and with a wave of both hands, Stephen burst into multiple astral projected copies of himself, the images of Icon. The multiple Doctor Stranges floated independently through the air, surrounding the Scarlet King. Then, as every Stephen gave an outward flick of his wrist, the crimson bands of Keter flew from their hands. The bright red belts of energy, virtually indestructible, bound the powerful chaotic king lashing around his physical form. Doctor Strange, being able to see and perceive the Scarlet King, was granting his adversary power. He pulled with all his physical strength, the crimson bands starting to wane, slackening despite Strange's efforts to keep all his duplicates holding on. Gripping the bands in his huge, gnarled hands, the Scarlet King swung the multiple Stranges around, forcing them all back into the same singular body as they collided. Still holding the one remaining crimson band of Keter, the Scarlet King started to drag Stephen towards him. The king didn't want him dead. Strange knew it. He'd be tortured, made and unmade, even until the entity forced him to use his third eye again, like he had done to Dr. Montauk. If Dr. Strange could fully comprehend the Scarlet King's nature, origin, and ideology, then the king would be able to achieve his full strength. That was the trap the Sorcerer Supreme had been lured into. His own arrogance, his need to be the one who saved the multiverse, the man holding the scalpel, was a weakness the Scarlet King was prepared to exploit in order to achieve the power he needed to overthrow the multiverse. There was only one thing left that Doctor Strange could do, one last-ditch effort. It was a long shot, but he hoped it would be enough. Releasing his remaining band, Stephen began casting a spell to send a message to another of his selves somewhere else in the multiverse. He could hear the Scarlet King looming behind him, ready to strike. Maybe the king would kill him, but Strange wouldn't let that stopping him cast his spell. His warning would reach the other self even after death in the form of a dream. A warning not to make the same mistake as this Strange had, to not go searching for the Scarlet King. Now go check out Deadpool vs. SCP-682 and SCP-001 The Scarlet King for more wild battles and eldritch monsters.